All right, we've been talking about this a lot in the last week, in particular, since Governor Mike DeWine vetoed House Bill 68 in Ohio. Kind of a big disappointment, quite frankly. But the Ohio House of Representatives has scheduled a vote tomorrow to override Governor Mike DeWine's veto of House Bill 68, which includes a SAFE Act to protect children from experimental gender procedures, as well as rules to protect female athletes and to keep this information from being hidden from parents. Now, in the schools, if the House vote to override is successful, as is expected, the Ohio Senate will likely schedule its override vote for January the 24th. Joining me now to discuss this is the sponsor of House Bill 68, State Representative Gary Click. He represents the 88th District of Ohio. He's also a pastor. Pastor Gary, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Good evening, Tony. Thank you for having me.
So give us your sense of going into tomorrow's override vote.
Our momentum is very good. You know, you never want to count your chickens till they hatch, but every sign that we see is a good sign. My colleagues were clamoring to come back and vote on this. They're very upset. They're very perturbed by the governor's veto, and quite honestly, the sense that the governor wants to take over and rewrite this bill and have us pass his version after he spent 10 days studying this, and now he's the expert. But we've invited him to join us for 2.5 years to participate in this. And it wasn't until an hour before we actually voted on it that he wanted some concessions. And that just doesn't work for us. That has a lot of my colleagues upset in the manner that he's done that. And there's a lot of momentum, people flying back from Florida and other places just to be here to vote to override the governor.
So, Representative, let me ask you this. Last Friday, Governor DeWine signed an emergency order banning surgeries for minors. Now, this was after he vetoed the bill, but from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're right there, my perspective from a political standpoint was that he's just trying to let some of the pressure off and say, oh, I've taken care of this.
That's right. He's trying to let some of the pressure off. And found very interesting is that while he did that, he said everyone agrees on that, which is true to an extent. But he said they're not really happening, but this just takes it off the table. And I don't know why he would say they're not really happening, because we've provided irrefutable evidence that it is happening on minors right here in Ohio. We have all kinds of proof of that. And so why he said that, I don't know. But if he really wants to do good, what he needs to do, Tony, is he also needs to do an executive order to ban the puberty blockers because I'm glad he did that executive order, because there's a 90-day window before any legislation takes effect. And so there was going to be a rush on those surgeries for these kids. And now, because we gave him a grandfather clause at his request, he asked for it. I gave it to him reluctantly, but I did. And now there's going to be a rush on the puberty blockers, those chemically castrating drugs for minors, to get in under that grandfather clause if we're not careful. So, tomorrow I'm going to challenge him to sign an executive order to ban those, to at least keep people from getting on those in that immediate time for the grandfather clause.
So, Pastor Gary, much has been made of the governor's statement following his veto about saving lives. Now, you've been working on this for years. I mean, almost since the start when these things began, and we've been working on them here at the Family Research Council. Why is that a flawed argument?
It's a flawed argument. It's an emotional argument, but it's not an evidence-based argument. If you actually look, before 2014, when we started this in Ohio, there was no epidemic of suicides because people had gender dysphoria. And when you actually look, suicide around the nation has actually increased from the time they started this in Boston in 2007. The youth suicide rate has steadily increased and gone up. And so you would think that if gender dysphoria and gender dysphoria causes suicide, you'd think that once we started banning these treatments around the nation, that the suicides would actually go up. But guess what? Ever since Robin Lundstrom started in Arkansas, and we've had over 20 states since then, the actual youth suicide rates have gone down, not up. But it's an appeal to emotion. How do you argue that when someone is with tears in their eyes telling you this? The reality is that suicidal ideations they precede the gender dysphoria. They don't follow it. Right. So the gender dysphoria is the result, not the cause.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that They just refuse to see the facts. If you look at the facts, the statistics, and what's interesting, and I'm sure you've seen this, Pastor Gary, that increasingly they're intimidating the researchers not to actually do the research because they don't want the facts out there because it refutes what they're trying to do.
Absolutely right, and that's one thing I have to compliment the governor on. We've got some things where we're butting heads right now, but he did say he wants to get the numbers and the evidence and the data from the hospitals. I had that in an earlier version of the SAFE Act, and we had to negotiate that out because there was so much opposition to it. So I support that. They don't want to give us the data because the data will tell the tale, and they don't want us to know the facts.
Yeah. Pastor Gary, final question. How can our viewers and listeners help you there in Ohio that reside in the Buckeye State?
Keep calling, keep sending emails. I've gotten more organic outreach into my office on this bill, on this override, than I have anything since I've ever been here. And my colleagues are having the same. So we just need to keep the pressure up till we get it done. Calls, phone calls, emails, whatever it takes. Get a hold of your legislator and tell them you want them to override the veto. Thank you, Tony.
All right.
Thank you for your prayers.
Pastor Gary, we will do just that. And once again, thanks for your leadership, and we'll be praying and watching tomorrow.
God bless you, Tony. Thank you for praying.